You're listening to Southeast Radio's Business Matters with Karl Fitzpatrick in association with Wexford Insurances. Challenge us at Wexford Insurances 0818 31 30 30.
Carol Crosbie from Sales Results and an Escorty-based sales consultant is with me now in studio. Carol, tell me a bit about your own background, please.
My background really has been in sales for over 20 years. I worked in the UK in IT sales. I returned to Ireland and started in a sales role in DataPack here in Wexford and developed into a sales management position. In that sales management position, I was basically responsible for teams of salespeople, for the recruitment and development of them, and really was instrumental in delivering huge growth for DataPack over a number of years.
And how long ago is it since you left DataPack, and what was the reason for it?
I left DataPack 2 years ago. Luckily, while I was at DataPack, I was given the opportunity and indeed the encouragement to further my studies. So I actually went to the Irish Management Institute in Sandyford, where I completed a Master of Business. I finished that in May of 2010, and during my study time I thought I would really like to get more involved in sales. I had the realisation one day that really IT wasn't what did it for me, it was more sales. And what I liked about IT was how it enabled business, but it was really business and sales that rocked my boat. It was sales that makes the business happen, so that's really where my interest always was.
So that was the foundation stone for Sales Results and the formulation of it. Tell me, what do Sales Results do?
Sales Results are a sales consultancy company. We work with companies in order to improve their productivity and their profitability. I basically help companies do better with the resources that they have.
And how do you go about that?
Well, really, there are 4 key areas that I focus on. The first is sales consultancy. The second is sales training. The third is sales recruitment. And then finally, it's the whole area of prospect management and opportunity management.
I know from lots of business people out there that one of their major challenges with sales is actually hiring the right salespeople. What advice would you give to business owners that are listening to today's show that might have an interest in hiring salespeople over the coming months?
The first piece of advice I would give really, Carl, is to slow the whole process down. I find that people think they have touched on the right salesperson or found the right salesperson and they hire too fast rather than taking their time, maybe doing some psychometric testing, which involves really getting an insight into the personality traits of the person. There are different psychometric tests out there on the market. And as I say, they give you an insight. For example, if you're in sales, you need to have very good interpersonal skills. So these psychometric tests allow the manager to get an insight into the ability of their interview candidate to see how good they are at dealing with people, basically. So psychometric testing is one thing I would recommend. Checking of references is another thing that I would strongly recommend, and to go deeper into the reference as deep as you can to try and establish how good the person was in their previous role. The next thing I would say is that really to get a deep understanding of the industry knowledge that person has. You know, they should understand the business that they're coming into, and to ask them questions, you know, to get them to role play nearly in an interview situation, to ask them questions that will prove to you as the recruiter how good that person would be sitting in front of a customer. So really, in an interview situation, go as deep as you can and really get a good understanding of the candidate.
How many interviews should the employer provide or undertake with the potential employee, do you think, before they should commit to employing them?
I would certainly recommend a minimum of 2 to 3 interviews. Obviously, depending on the seniority of the role, it's possible to have more. And another thing, if a sales role involves a lot of documentation, I would actually get the candidate to actually write up some documentation, make them aware that when they come to an interview, there would be some testing of their written ability, and get them to do that while they're actually sitting there in the interview.
How important do you think industry contacts are for taking on somebody?
I think that they are hugely important. At the same time, you know, some people are hired because if I'm hiring somebody, I think, oh, they've worked in my competitors, they're going to be able to move all their contacts with them. I think that some companies put too much emphasis on that. A salesperson is not the only reason that clients deal with a particular company. So they need to really, while contacts are important, I think sometimes too much emphasis can be put on them.
Another big challenge for employers is when they're putting together a package for a salesperson. Suppose they're torn between two ports here and they're saying to themselves, do I pay this person a good basic salary and little commission, or do I drive most of their package through commission and give them a small basic salary? What's your own opinion on that?
My opinion is that the basic salary, I certainly wouldn't pay a high basic salary until I know the quality of the salesperson that I have, until I understand how much revenue they're going to be able to put through the company. I would recommend that sales behaviours that you want to see are rewarded. So I would basically recommend that you pay for the behaviours that you want and the behaviours that are going to drive sales. So a lower basic and higher commission.
Let's move to the next step. Let's say, for instance, the employer does take on a salesperson. From your experience in dealing with businesses out there from a sales perspective, are you finding that employers are giving their staff the right training in order to be able to do the job?
Unfortunately, I don't think salespeople are given enough training. Too often I've seen it that once a new person has been recruited, they're given a phone, possibly a car if it's an outbound job, at best a list of prospects and told to go and sell. I think that they need to be coached more. I would see that the manager has a huge role to play in terms of coaching a new recruit, helping them to understand the role. I think key performance indicators should be put in place so that there is clarity for the salesperson as well as for the manager to see how well the person is progressing, and the training should be given if there are obstacles along the way. If they can be identified, then training should be given to help the person along and give them every opportunity to succeed in the new role.
Why do you think that employers are deficient in the area of training in respect to sales staff?
I just don't think enough focus and thought is put into it. And as well, training is sometimes viewed as, if there's a problem with sales, get some sales training. When really it's ridiculous to think that somebody would come in, provide sales training and walk away and it's going to transform the company. There needs to be some training that's tailored specifically to suit the requirements of the individuals involved. And the person giving the training needs to understand the outcomes that the company requires. And then what I would suggest is that there is follow-up training to ensure that the behaviours that were expected after the training are actually being enforced, and that the salespeople are doing and following through on what was trained, rather than a one-day or half-day training and the trainer walks away.
We've covered recruiting salespeople. We've spoken a little bit about the training of salespeople. Let's now move on to managing salespeople. A serious problem for most company owners out there today. What are your thoughts on that?
Yes, it is a problem for managers out there. I suppose one of the problems with salespeople is that they are outbound, so they're not in the office. I think it's very important to have a sales process around what salespeople do that gives the manager visibility. I think it's very important to have a common language. If a salesperson goes out to a meeting and comes back and said, yes, that was a good meeting, what does that mean? Does it mean that they knew somebody and were able to chat about a common friend, or does it mean that there is actually a next step? There's a next step in the process. So a manager needs to clearly define the expectation and provide clarity for the salesperson so that they know what's expected of them.
From what you're saying, process seems to be very, very important. Is there such thing as a sales process?
There most certainly is a sales process, Carol, and I would say that the sales process is really a way of doing things. The sales process should become part of the culture in an organisation. It's steps that are followed to ensure that every prospect or every opportunity that comes through the doors of the organisation is followed through correctly, so that the owner-manager knows that they've done their best as an organisation to close that business and to educate the prospect as to why they should do business with them.
What exactly does the sales process involve?
I would see that there are really 6 stages to a sales process, Carl. The first being building rapport with the prospect, getting in front of them, opening up the conversation. The second would be identifying the needs of your prospect. The third would be building the solution to match or to meet those needs and being able to explain it well to your prospect. The fourth would be handling any objections that they may have. And I would always say that objections are not necessarily objections. They're really often a request for more information. It's nearly like the customer saying to you, you haven't quite convinced me, help me make a decision here. The fifth would be then closing the sale, which if you've done the rest of the process before that correctly, it should really be a natural progression. And then the final stage, I believe, is looking for referrals. If you've done a good job there, then you should be able to get referrals from that prospect who's now become a customer and then generate further business moving forward.
From your experience across Wexford County, what percentage of businesses are utilising that process?
From my own experience, I would say it's a very, very low number, a very, very low number. It's rare to come across a company that actually has a sales process, an effective sales process in place, and more worryingly, a company that actually follows the sales process.
What do you think the reason for that is?
I think sales management have an awful lot to answer for. I think sales management or an owner manager need to have the right process in place, and then it's their job really to ensure that it's followed. And I suppose to communicate with staff so that staff understand, look, this is what we want you to do and this is why this makes sense. So really communication is a key issue there.
We've all come across salespeople that have come into our own businesses to sell us something, and they've come in the door with a view to just talking us into buying their product. Is that what you're finding is happening out there with most of the businesses that you're dealing with when you go in the door first?
Yes, I think, there's the old saying, you'd hear people say, oh, he's the gift of the gab, he'd make a great salesperson. I think the opposite is actually true. In a lot of cases, salespeople don't do a good job because they don't listen enough. In some instances, they don't actually ask the right questions. They might talk a lot, but they're not asking the right questions to open up the conversation. And secondly, the old saying, we're given 2 ears and 1 mouth. So really the salesperson should listen more. And it's only through listening that they can then put forward the right solution for the customer, one that actually fits what the customer needs.
Tell me a little bit about the process that you go through when you go into a new client to help them improve their own sales.
Okay, when I go in front of a client myself, first I understand how they do what they do at the minute, and I understand the results that process delivers for them. So I'm a fresh pair of eyes basically coming into an organisation and understanding in sales terms what actually happens in this organisation. And once I get an understanding of that, I interact with people within the organisation, I understand where they want to get to from where they are now. And then I put a process in place, which is often small, but very, very significant steps that will impact on the sales that they generate and impact on the interactions that they have with prospects.
Well, it's certainly been a very insightful interview, and I'm sure our listeners will be able to implement some of these strategies in their own businesses.
You're listening to Southeast Radio's Business Matters with Karl Fitzpatrick in association with Wexford Insurances. Think Wexford Insurances for your business insurance.